Bound by Ice, a true North Pole survival story by Sandra Neal Wallace and Rich Wallace, a reflection on the role of dogs. Many who read this thrilling tale ask the following question: is this really a story about dogs? According to the account, Commander DeLong loaded up with 40 dogs for pulling sleds, 6 tons of dried fish to feed those dogs, sealskin clothing for the crew, and other supplies. So from this we can infer that dogs are pretty important in the narrative. The first we learn about the dogs is that they help to haul a polar bear back to the Jeannette after a successful hunt. Additionally, much is made of the diet of the dogs. For example, walruses provided food for men and dogs. And at one point, the dogs had an opportunity to feast on some prime seabird meat when the birds began to stink prior to being prepped as taxidermic specimens. Bummer. However, it is in Chapter 9, First Mates, when the dogs in the story take center stage. Smike, Snoozer, Bismarck, Plug Ugly. Life on a frozen ship wasn't easy for men or dogs, but the 40 dogs always made the best of it. They seem perfectly oblivious to all surroundings, utterly indifferent whether the sun shines or does not shine, so long as they are fed. From the liberal diet of bear meat and seal's entrails, they have remained fat as dumplings. Those names sound like Disney characters. Does eating out of a can make me look fat? Some of the dogs came to a bad end, like Bingo. Somehow Bingo slipped out of his harness and ran off, much to the disgust of the other dogs, DeLong wrote, who attempted to chase him. One of the sailors predicted that Bingo would get a beatdown for desertion, which proved true. After Bingo returned to the ship, the other dogs attacked and killed him. These guys are really tough, and indicating that I committed an act of desertion is straight-up anthropomorphism. Life goes on. It was a sad moment, but there wasn't much room for sentimentality. A dead animal could supply nourishment and clothing. We skinned him to have his coat for future wearing apparel, and his carcass lies frozen on the deckhouse roof for possible food for his murderers, DeLong wrote. Other dog casualties included hard-working Jack, who died from eating mutton bones, 2 sharp pieces of a tin can, a piece of cloth, and a hunk of rope. This is exactly why I warned you about cans. And Plug Ugly was killed in a bloody battle with a 374-pound bear. The men were in dire straits and needed help. At first, the dogs hauled equipment across the frozen landscape, but ran away when they sized up the situation. However, the men dragged the dogs through the water, and once the dogs had crossed and were hitched to the sled, the poor shivering brutes were soon warming themselves in the hard work ahead of them. In time, DeLong made the difficult decision to shoot 10 dogs, which he said were completely worn out or sick. The amount of food these 10 dogs eat is not compensated for by the work done, and I must think of human life first, he explained. Other dogs jumped overboard and were lost. When this is over, I'm getting a timeshare with Prince, Smike, and Snoozer. DeLong kept his eye on poor Snoozer, the last remaining dog, who trotted by his side. The pemmican was almost gone, and except for one stringy seagull, they hadn't been able to shoot any game. Snoozer could provide a couple of meals for the 14 men. After that... Later, Snoozer died on October 3rd, victim of a carefully aimed gunshot. DeLong could not bring himself to eat the resulting stew, though most of the men did. That's it. That's the end of the story as I see it. The protagonist died. Maybe this ending leaves you with questions like, who were those brave dogs really? Or, what is pemmican? My name is Hershel, and I am a miniature schnauzer. I am going to introduce you to a husky I know from the Boardman Dog Park, since this is obviously a book about huskies. By the way, pemmican is a paste of dried meat, melted fat, and berries. This is Tsar Nicholas, also known as Nico. Nico is a Husky, and he has an illustrious heritage, which you might like to learn about. So watch this video recording of Nico's owner and bask in the greatness of Huskies. And after you finish, I have a delightful art project for you to try based on the mask of the Husky. Nico belongs to Chief Mulligan, former fire chief of Struthers for 30 years. Note, I watch Nico play through the fence on the big dog side of the park. Nico is the only dog who visits with me. The others are terrified of me, for good reason. Watch this video.
Will you start again?
Well, my name's Hershel. I have a Husky. This is the first Husky I ever had. He's about 10 years old. I did a lot of research on the Huskies, and they originally came from Russia, the Siberia region. It's called Chukchi Peninsula, and the Chukchis are the reason it's named the peninsula. And it's in the Bering Straits. If you know where the Bering Straits are, Alaska is one side, and the Chukchi Peninsula, they're separated by 55 miles. And the Chukchi, over thousands of years, got the Husky to what they wanted to be, because they're a tribe that travels quite a bit. They almost like the Eskimos. They hunt for fish, whales, seals. So what they did was domesticate them and breed them to be strong, be sled dogs that they could use. And then in 1907, the guy in Alaska that traded furs made a deal with some of the Russians, brought the first Huskies to Alaska, and then they dominated the sled races. He brought them for sled racing, and they were so good, they were impressed that they began to breed them in Alaska for dog racing. Come here. And then in one of the interesting stories, 1930, there was I forget what the epidemic, scarlet fever, maybe. But anyway, they had no serum, and the rivers were frozen. They had no way to get them. They got a sled dog team. It ended up, they went 24 hours, 50 miles to deliver the serum. And there's a statue of the famous sled dog that led it for 50 miles. He's in New York City, around Central Park. And I forget his name. Just a great dog. They're independent, loving, caring. They're not watchdogs. But they don't bark. They communicate by yelping. And you can see them yelp almost any time. If you get close to a Husky, they're trying to talk to you. That's how they communicate. And that's basically what I know about Huskies.
Here's my idea for an art project. You could download a free Neon Doodle art app and draw Nico's face. Samples made with Kids Doodle Color and Draw app by Doodle Joy Studio. The mask looks great against a black background because it's so dramatic. And if you want to show me your drawing, send a picture of Nico or your own dog created with a Doodle art app. My address is sgraber@ysu.edu. The S stands for Snoozer.